Hi, everybody. It's Lindsey again, and I have a little bit of feedback. Today we're going to do a knitting project. There's another echo. Whoops. It's not on my end, is it? Gosh, I'm so sorry. I muted myself. So, welcome, since you guys didn't hear anything I said. I muted myself by accident trying to figure out where the echo was coming from. All right, I'm here. My name is Lindsey Gutierrez, and I teach knitting and crocheting with Craft Academy. And I'm just showing off my beautiful ear warmer. And I just wanted to say that it's very important to follow all the directions exactly as the pattern specifies. If you have sort of an average to sort of large, I mean, my head isn't huge, but it's, it fits snugly in hats. So if you have an average sized head, I guess, and most hats fit you, I would do the 61 stitch cast on for that. And if you need the pattern, just look below the video in the show notes there, whatever we call them. Let's see, we have all the technical difficulties today. I'm glad you're joining us. And we're with craftacademy.org. If you saw in the video leading up to this one, it's a nonprofit specializing in arts education. So trying to bring more arts to more people. I also don't see the like hand view. Do you guys see the hand view on? Oh, there it is. Okay, cool. Now I can see it. I just want to make sure everything's working. So on the note of exact size, you want this to fit you after all the work you've done making it. So if you really want to do a quick 3-stitch gauge, we'll cast on and just do a three-stitch gauge really quick, and then we'll measure that. And if it's 1 inch, then that is at least going to tell you if you're knitting at the right tautness in order to get the size that you're looking for. But if you do have a kind of a small head, take a couple of stitches off, and it won't hurt it because it's already kind of loose on me. I don't think it will be too small. And it just says you do need an odd number of stitches. So as long as you have an odd number of stitches, you should be good. Let's get started. And just to go over our materials, scissors, of course, an optional measuring tape if you want to measure a gauge. If you want to weave in the ends and not just have them hanging down like I do on this one, you're going to need a tapestry needle or yarn needle. You absolutely need a place marker. Now, there are ways to get around that, but it can confuse things. So if you have even like a safety pin, something to put on your yarn for a marker, we're going to be needing that. And you need bulky weight yarn. It says in the pattern number 5. So bulky should do it. And if you go any smaller than number 5, when you read the label, then you will end up with a lot of like gaps in your beautiful ear warmer. Or if you go too big, you could end up with a huge ear warmer that doesn't fit your head. I sprung for like the mid-range of yarn needles instead of like the super duper cheap ones. I got the Clover brand, which I like to have something a little nicer if I'm going to be using them a lot, and I'm sure I will be. A circular needle I use so much because I love to make cowls and I do love to make headbands. So this is perfect for wintertime, the bulky weight yarn. And it's US 11 or 8mm. And you don't want it to be too long, and I'm sorry that this wasn't specified in the pattern, but if you're getting too many inches with your circular needle, it's going to be hard to join in the round. So at some point, you're going to have to connect to the other side of your yarn and continue knitting. So if this is huge, that would make that very difficult. It would be really stretched. Okay, so what do we do first? We cast on. And last week we talked about how you can kind of cheat your way through cast on by wrapping it around the needle to see how long you need your tail to be. And I always do a long tail cast on when I need it to be flexible like this. So you definitely want a flexible headband, right? You don't want it to be like super tight. So with our cast on, we're doing a long tail cast on today. So I start by giving a little 5 inches at the end, at least, in order to weave in. And then if there's a little extra yarn, that's okay. And I start by wrapping it around my needles to see how long my tail does need to be. And you can do as many wraps around the needle as there are in cast on stitches. So if you go back to the pattern, CO means cast on, STS means stitches. And that's the first thing we're going to take care of right now. So I'm going to wrap it around at least 30 times and then I'm just going to double it because I don't want to count to 61. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so that's 30 plus 5 inches. So that should be enough. It might even end up with like 10, like 10 extra inches. And then I just take the end where I got to 30 and I drag it all the way to another area on the yarn where I'm going to actually start. So I doubled my yarn, and this is where I want to start my slip knot, right? Is that the next thing we need to know? Okay. Well, we're going to cast on our stitches. We're going to now create a slip knot, and I'm going to use, I guess the long tail is going to be facing me, right? The long tail part. And then the part connected to my yarn is kind of away from me, if that helps. Okay. And I make a little loop. And as one of my students told me, it looks like a fishy. It was the cutest thing. And it always helps me remember. And I'm going to take the bar from the long tail and put it behind the loop. So the part that's on top, I wrap it kind of behind. And then I take the end of my needle and I lift up that bar that I just put behind the loop. And then I take the 2 ends and pull. And we'll do that one or 2 more times. And it's easy to take out. So you know you did it right if it just comes right out. Okay, so I'll just make a loop. Doesn't matter the size even. Put the long tail behind my loop, so there's a bar going behind it. Lift up the bar through the loop and pull the 2 ends. And then look, it tightens, it slips, it's a knot. We did it. And then I wouldn't make it too loose or too tight, that perfect in between. That's always nice. And now the long tail cast on, which we did cover last week, but we're just always going to start from the very beginning every week in case anyone wasn't here last week. So I am going to put my hands in like a kind of a crab formation here. And I'm going to grab both of the pieces of yarn hanging down from my slip knot. And remember, this is my ball of yarn. This is my long tail. I'm just going to grab them like that. Very odd feeling, right? That's what you're getting used to when you're knitting, is like not getting your yarn in too many knots and that you don't want, and having your hands be in weird new positions. So here's the first one. And then you're going to use your index finger to separate the part of the yarn that's connected to your ball. And you're going to use your thumb to separate the yarn that's connected to your long tail. And then you're going to get used to this motion here. It's all in the wrist knitting. Just kidding. But sometimes it is, right? So let's try that again. I'm going to go ahead and just clamp it. Use the index finger to separate the part of the yarn that is connected to the ball, and use the thumb to separate the part that is connected to the long tail. And then turn it towards yourself. And now for the fun part, we're going to start casting on to the needle. So you put your needle down over the yarn that's looped around your thumb. And then your thumb is holding it nice and open. So all you have to do is just slip your needle under that piece of yarn. And oh, feels really awkward. Let's try it again. You can also do this if you don't really want to use your middle fingers to grab it. You can just grab it. That's okay too, if that's easier for you. So you're slipping it underneath for the thumb, right? The thumb, long tail, slipping it underneath. And then now you have like a loop on your needle, and you're going to take that needle and just go over the top of the yarn that's on your index finger. And actually that's going to end up being the loop that you pull through the loop you just made. So it's like you're creating a couple of loops in one fell swoop here. So you go underneath the thumb and over the top of the index, and then you grab that yarn and pull it through that loop you just made, and then use your thumb to tighten it. So definitely want to tighten it each time. Oh, and I just saw a question, do we have to use circular needles with this pattern? So I think if you were going to use 3 double pointed needles, I think that's like usually the way to go get around a circular needle, or so that it kind of looks like a circular shape. Or if you just did it straight like last week where you don't join it, you just go back and forth, which might be a little complicated if you're following along with this webinar. But if you went back and forth and then just sewed it on the side, it won't look as neat because the pattern you'll just see like a line on the side. So the best thing you can do is hunt down your circular needles, or watch the video later after you've gotten some circular needles. Okay, so I just wanted to also give you guys a chance to quickly see what 3 stitches looks like if it's an inch. So you could take some yarn and just quickly knit 3 stitches. So I would turn this part that I just cast on 3 stitches. I would turn it, and then I would put my needle in on the inside of the first stitch, but out the back. And it really doesn't matter because this isn't really going to be your headband. This is going to be a gauge, and it's only 3 stitches, so might as well do it. It's easy, it's quick. So I'm going to wrap around towards where the 2 needles touch. So I'm taking the yarn in the back and wrapping it counterclockwise, if that helps you, towards where the 2 needles come together. And then that becomes a loop. That's the yarn over in essence. And then that's going to become the new loop, the knit stitch. Now tighten it. You have to tighten it a little more at the ends. And then do it again. We're going to wrap around towards where the 2 needles come together, and then take that yarn over and turn it into a loop by pulling it through this loop at the front. Wrap around, pull it through the front. And then I guess if you were going to quickly measure that, if it's an inch, then you're probably safe to, that's about an inch, I guess, right? Let's see. Yeah, it's about an inch. You're safe to use that yarn and that needle. If it's smaller, you could try and use a bigger yarn needle, or but yeah, it's one of those things, like, you kind of, if you're using bulky yarn and your yarn needle's too big, it could make some big gaps in your ear warmer. Okay, so I'm actually just going to start over because that was my gauge. And it looks like I'm good to go because I only had, I had 3 stitches for my gauge and it was 1 inch, and it should turn out like the one I made before, hopefully, right? As long as I'm not feeling like it's a day to be too loose or too tight with my knitting, it should be looking really nice. So we're gonna keep casting on. It's gonna be one of those fast motion ones too, because we have to get to the at least a couple rows in, 3 rows at least, in order for this to be productive, skills driven, fun webinar where you feel like you can finish on your own. That would be great, right? So let's review, how do we do the cast on? We can grab it with all our 3 bottom fingers there with the pinky ring in middle, use our index finger to push out the yarn side, use our thumb to pull out the long tail, put the needle under the thumb yarn, see, underneath the one that's closest to you, and then the part of the yarn that's closest to you on your index finger, you're going to go over the top of it and pull it in. Okay, under, over, pull it through the loop. Under, over, pull it through the loop, and tighten. I always like that little saying, okay, under, over, pull it through the loop, tighten. That way, when you're doing it later, you don't have to watch a video every single time you want to do something. You kind of have a little mnemonic device in your head, which is nice. And then I'm just going to be doing it as quickly as I can and not even counting. And that's how I always do it. And then I just spend a long time counting at the end, but that's okay, because it's all about, right, the meditative enjoyment of it, where you're getting to get lost in thought, or I don't know, ignoring something. Like I say, I always like to knit when my husband's driving us around, because I don't want to look at the road. I'd rather just enjoy knitting. Or maybe you're doing something that requires you to listen, like maybe you're doing some continuing education for your job and all you have to do is listen to a podcast or something. So you can't really watch TV while you do that. You gotta knit instead. There's lots of things you can do while you're knitting. It's wonderful, as long as you don't need your hands. Sometimes when I'm hanging out with my 2-year-old son, if he's playing with cars and he's busy, I'm usually knitting or crocheting. Depends. Definitely a great way to spend the summer. And then at the end of the summer, you'll either have tons of beautiful pieces for your winter wardrobe, or you'll have tons of gifts for Christmas, and all you have had to spend on it is your time and a few bucks for yarn and needles. And homemade gifts are always so treasured. People keep them even if they don't wear them. It's funny. I always give homemade gifts to my mother, and I notice she'll never ever use them. She'll keep them in totally pristine. If I make her like something, not usually knitting, but like a lotion or a body butter or soap, she'll never ever use it. It's the funniest thing. I'm like, that's meant to be used. But people love homemade gifts. They love to cherish them. So get started now, save a lot of money, and also make something that people will remember who they got it from and the time they spent with you. And then every time they see you, they'll wear it and they'll go, look at my beautiful cowl or my ear warmer. And that's always nice when someone shows you that they're enjoying it. Or you'll make something that someone doesn't like at all, but you'll have learned something. And that's That's fun too. Especially, you know, the way that Christmas is now, everyone, or if you don't celebrate it, Christmas would be another holiday, but everyone just gets things for each other, even if it means nothing. It's like, why not make it mean something? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28. All right, I'm at 54. I don't have many more to go. I hope you guys are also getting close to the end of your 61 cast on. 61 CO. And of course, I'm not counting again, so I have to count them all over again. I'm too excited. This is the part of the pattern where there's just excitement. After the third row or so is when I'm like, wow, it's really cool. It took me a while to see how this one would look, because I had to make one that was terrible and didn't fit me, and the pattern did not look good because I used the wrong yarn, and I was just trying to practice it. So by the time I got to the third row in this pattern, I was starting to see it, and it was looking really, really beautiful. And the pattern like had that cool design to it. So just stick with it. $63. I'm going to take a couple off because I want to do exactly 61. And of course, taking them off is super easy. You just take them off and they unravel. Okay. This is kind of the intense part. This is the new skill from last week. And maybe it's a new skill that you'll never use again, but I hope you do, because it's really fun to knit in the round. I enjoy it because then you don't have to sew anything together at the end. It's wonderful. And there's so many things you can do with knitting in the round. And look at that, my huge long extra tail, which is okay. And I can even cut it down a little if I don't want it to get in the way. You know, it's always better to have more than enough than not enough. Okay, so we just cast on all these, and now we need to start knitting with the ball of yarn. So be careful. Let's see. It would be preferable if this was in the back. It's sort of in the front. And our first stitch, let's look at it. Says, oh, it's a knit stitch, right? So you really do want the yarn in the back. Okay. Yeah, so that's what you want to do. You want to put everything you just cast on, keep your work in your right hand here, and have your ball of yarn on the back. Now you can PM, place your marker, which is kind of a funny little abbreviation that you can read in the pattern. If you just go down a little bit, it says PM, place marker. It's the easiest pattern. I love this. And I just put it right on the loop that's over the needle. And you're going to have to move it every time you start a new row. So that is my last stitch. That's where I placed my marker. Should I place it on my first stitch? You know what? I think I will place it. Well, never mind. I'll keep it. Last time I was knitting, it was on my last stitch. Maybe it'll be a little confusing for me because it's different, but I think it'll be better for you guys because it's the way the pattern is written. So cast on, I'm gonna place my marker on my very last stitch. And now I'm gonna start knitting what's over here. So I'm knitting kind of the beginning to the end here. The beginning to the end, yeah. So I'm using my needle on the right to go just to the left of my first stitch on my left-hand side needle. And then I enter from the, in between these two stitches, go to the back with my needle, and then I get to take my ball of yarn, connected extra yarn here, and wrap it counterclockwise, which if that's too confusing, I just think about how I'm going to wrap it around the back and it's going to come in between the two needles. That's easier for me spatially. And then the yarn that I'm using in my right hand is now connected to the very end, or the beginning, I guess you could say, of what I started casting on. So these are connected now. And now you want to be really careful that all of these cast on stitches are facing the same way in this loop. Nothing is twisted, okay? Otherwise it's going to look really strange. So let's keep knitting. So enter from the left side of that stitch, wrap around the back and between the two needles, take that loop through the front to create your new knit stitch, and then take off the old stitch. Take it off the left-hand side needle. So from the front to the back, wrap around the back in between, take that needle to pull that new yarn over into a stitch, take the old cast on stitch off the left-hand side needle. And now let's try and speed it up as much as we can till we can get to at least the third row. And look at it, you can already see the stitches building up. And here it's nothing. So it's like, it builds, this pattern is great. Bulky yarn is awesome because it builds up so quickly. It knits up so quickly and it looks great. Yeah, I mean, I also have to make a baby blanket for every baby that's born. Not really, but the ones that I'm really close to. And it's really, it shows you the labor of love if you make it with a less than bulky yarn, because it takes forever. So bulky yarn is awesome. That's why a lot of those really good beginner patterns will even have like oversized huge yarns. You can feel super productive in a short amount of time. Get yourself really excited for knitting. Get yourself feeling confident about knitting by doing something easy at the beginning. That's what I love about these projects, because I think the enemy of the knitting project is a long knitting project that takes forever. If you, lose interest or you start to feel bored, I think when you're first starting out, you should try and just keep it simple. That's at least my personality. Some people love to get into a very long-term project. And I personally get really excited, and I think everyone does, and motivation starts at a high, and then it sort of plateaus, and then it drops. So if you can get your project done before the end of your plateau of motivation, you are more likely to have something that will carry you to the next project because you actually finished a project. And you'll say, oh, I finished that. I learned everything and it looks great and it's useful. Another thing that happens a lot when you start knitting or crocheting is you don't like your first attempt, and that still happens to me. So, and I've been knitting for like 14 years, I guess, maybe 12. I can't remember exactly. And I've been crocheting since I was a very little child. So, and I still take a new pattern and I make it or get halfway through making it. I'm like, this isn't working. What's not working? And I like make it to completion and I say, well, that was my first attempt. That was fun, I guess, right? That was cool, but it's not my favorite thing that I've ever made. I want to make it again, and I'll make it like one more time, or I'll make it like 5 more times just to see how it improves each time, or like maybe I did it wrong the first time and the pattern is just a little bit off the way that I worked it up, and I'll do it again and again, and then it will just start to look better and better. So if you can get a short project going and make it many times, that can be really beneficial to your knitting education here. And then once you feel confident with that, you can start on those long-term projects. But if it's me, honestly, it will take me, sometimes it took me years to make a long-term big project because I would just be like, oh, what else can I make? And change my mind and make something different that, takes less time just to get my momentum going again. So if you're making blankets for everybody, you getting a little bored, stop and make a little headband or a cowl, or make an ear warmer, or learn how to make socks, or little booties you can wear around the house in the winter. Those are nice. Or the cutest thing ever that every baby should have is a bonnet. Oh my goodness. Bonnets with the little string and kind of the pixie look are coming back from the 50s or whenever they were popular. They're so cute. But you got to find a good pattern for those because they can be complicated. All right, so I'm getting to the end of my first knit round. And I don't know if I'm a slow knitter or not, because I just go at my own pace. But maybe you guys are all caught up too and you're getting close to the end of your first knit round. Or maybe you're just like really cursing this pattern. It's a little hard to join in the round. So if you had to do it a couple times to figure it out, do not fret. It's sort of confusing for me to do things like backwards, and it feels kind of backwards when you're knitting in the round. So when I got to my last stitch and knitted it, it sort of felt loose. I'm getting kind of worried. I'm like, oh, what's happening? And I'm pulling on my tail to make sure it doesn't get too separated. And now I'm in the second row of my pattern. All right. So I'm going to take a second and make sure everything's good. My place marker is down there, right? Because that's the old cast on stitch. I'm gonna have to move it up here. So it's on my last stitch on my right side needle. It's however you look at it, your first stitch, I don't know. On your right side needle, and then be careful not to lose your tail. Kind of keep your tail taut. Keep it close. Okay. And I'm going to quickly look at my pattern and say, round 2, K1, comma, P1 with asterisks on either side. So that means repeat to the end of round. So that's all those asterisks mean. Nothing too complicated. Just take that pattern and do it over and over and over and over to the end. So knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. Super easy and actually kind of more interesting than just knitting straight across. I enjoy it. It starts to become very rhythmic, keeps you interested because it's not just the same. It's like a little bit different. So I'm going to knit by putting my needle in between these 2 stitches on my left-hand side. Those are my knitting stitches that I just knitted. And I'm going to enter into that first stitch from the front and out the back. Wrap around the back with the yarn that's connected to my ball. Okay. Wrap around the back in between the two needles. And kind of using my fingers here to hold on to my work. And I totally did not talk about that when we were starting, because I was trying to get further along in this pattern than I did last week. But maybe you just kind of, hopefully you've knitted before and you kind of like, oh, okay, I know how to hold my needles. Don't worry. Don't worry. So I just knitted that stitch. I just took it off the left needle. And now I'm going to take my working yarn here and I'm going to bring it in between the two needles and bring it to the front. And if you've ever done purl before, right, I'm holding on to my left-hand side needle. I've got my working yarn wrapped around my pinky and then also between my index and middle finger. Keep it knit nice and taut. Didn't talk about that before. Sorry, guys. And using my middle fingers and thumb to kind of hold my right needle. Okay. And now I took my yarn, I brought it to the front because I have to purl. And how do we purl? So instead of going in between the two stitches, you go to the right of the stitch on your left-hand side needle. And you enter into that stitch, you put your right needle into that stitch and come out the front. So it's just it's like the mirror image, the opposite of a knit stitch. You're taking your right needle and entering through the front and coming out the front, essentially. So you're going to the right side of that knit stitch and your needle's coming out between. And now you're also going to knit towards where the needles come together, or sorry, yarn over towards where the needles come together. When you're purling, you're going in the same direction when you're yarning over. So that keeps it nice and rhythmic too. You're going in between the needles in the same direction as when you're knitting. Keeping it nice and taut so that you can push that piece of yarn over. See that bit of yarn? You're going to push it through that loop on your left needle and out the back. And then you have to take that loop from the left hand and take it off the needle just like you do with your right, your knitting, right? So pulling on my tail to keep it close here. Now I'm going to take my yarn and go to the back side again to knit. So I go in between the two stitches and out the back. You wrap in the same direction coming into the in-between space between the needles. I like that. It's like, tuck it in. And then using that bit of yarn over to make a loop and take that old knit stitch off. And now you have a new knit stitch. Now you're going to take your yarn to the front again. And it's time to purl again. You can adjust your work. You can get it closer to the edge of your needle so it's not going to be all stretched out and have a big gap. If you're kind of working with your yarn like further down in your needles, all your stitches further down, you might have like a bigger gap because your yarn over isn't going to be as tight. Okay, so bringing your yarn to the front, putting your right needle in on the right side of the yarn and in between, coming out in between in the front of those two knit stitches on your left needle, and then yarning over in the same direction as before between the two needles, and then pushing that yarn over back out the back to make a purl stitch, and then taking off the old knit stitch off the left needle. All right, so let's take a look. I don't know if you guys are able to see on your screen. Hopefully you have a big screen on your computer. When you're following along, it's a lot easier to see, but this is a knit stitch with a V. This is a purl stitch with a little cute bump. Here's another knit stitch with a V, and then the purl stitch we just made with the cute little bump here. And it's going to make a nice, it kind of looks sort of like a diagonal-ish look, but it's not. I don't know, it looks really nice when it's done. But we're just getting started, and that's only the second row. So let's try and speed it up a little bit if you can, so we can get to at least the third row. Knit, purl in the front, yarn over, out the back here. Bring your yarn to the back for the knit. Putting your needle in through the front and out the back, yarn over, pull that new stitch off the left needle. Purl, wrap that yarn over, knit with the yarn to the back, purl with the yarn to the front. Don't want to go too fast or too slow. I'm going to give myself some slack here. Okay, now we're on knit. Wherever you are, you know, it's like when you're doing yoga and you're like following your own breath, right? You're just going to follow your own heart here. Do it at your pace and try to get all the skills before we run out of time. I just love this pattern and I like this color, although, you know, I didn't really consider myself a pink and purple type of person until recently. And I don't know if I have no idea what the current fashion is for this kind of lavender, but I just like those colors now. It's weird how your preferences change. I don't want a bold color. I want a very like soft color that I can wear with anything, you know. I just love it. I used to wear a lot of bold colors, and maybe I will one day again soon. Who knows? I don't know about you. What are you guys working with? Maybe you're doing a bright yellow or a black. You can go with anything. Maybe gray. I did a lot of gray when I first started knitting because I was knitting for other people, and I didn't want them to just put it in their closet and never wear it again. And I knew they liked gray. Or warm colors are nice in the winter. I know everyone wears like sort of cold colors, but warm it up a little. I like burgundy in the winter. My cowl is burgundy. It's so pretty. And it can go with a lot of different jackets, but you know, most people get like a pretty neutral colored jacket. So if you're gonna wear your headband with on your commute or something, and you just have like a black coat or gray coat, any color would look nice with it. Nice little pop of color. Maybe you're a beige person. Notice those white creams, beiges are really popular. Sometimes, who knows what it'll be this winter. Maybe your summer colors will influence what you'll end up wearing for winter, because you won't be able to switch gears. That'll be fun. Get some like neon colors for winter. But start looking now at all your inspiration. Start your winter wardrobe. Or just think about someone you love and their favorite color and make it for them. And they'll even like, oh my gosh, my mother-in-law will always ask for the first thing I make. I'm like, it's not going to look as good the first time I made it, but she'll cherish it forever. It's so funny how you don't think it looks perfect, but someone else will love it. But they'll also get to see how you have evolved as a knitter or a crocheter and how you've improved. So they'll get to compare it to your first attempt or your second and be like, wow, look at that change. Or maybe you're making something for your kids and for your significant other, and they'll just be like, wow, you made me something. And they won't appreciate it now when they're little, but when they get older, they'll pass it down to their kids, or they'll love it forever. Who knows? Okay, I'm getting to the end of my row here. And I can tell because there's a place marker. And I want to make sure I've done this correctly. I'm on my last stitch. I'm knitting the last stitch. Oh no. It's an odd numbered pattern. So like if you did 61 stitches and you got to the end and you did the same stitch at the end as you did at the beginning, that, as confusing as it is what you have done. Yeah, I don't think you're supposed to count your slip knot as, unless you're not supposed to count your slip knot as one of the cast on stitches, you're supposed to do 62. I don't know. So now we're going to go to round 3 and just do the opposite, really, right? So I knitted at the beginning of round 2, I did a knit and a purl, right? So now, as long as I do the opposite over top of whatever is coming in my way, then it will look nice at the end. It will look perfect. Like the one I made before. I was like, what is happening? Am I supposed to be doing 2 knits side by side? Well, this one's at the end of the row and this one's at the beginning. So they're not quite side by side. They're still like a little bit on a different level from each other. So it's okay. If that feels weird, that's okay. So I placed my marker on the stitch that's on my needle. I moved it up. The last thing I did in this row was, the second row was a knit stitch. Now I'm going to move to the third row and I have to do the opposite of what I see. The first thing I did in row 2 was knit 1, purl 1. And now I'm going to be purling 1, knitting 1 till the end. So I'm going to start with my yarn in the front and I'm going to purl. See, I can see the V from the knit. I'm going to enter from this right side of this stitch and come out the front in between the 2 stitches, yarn over in the same direction as the knitting in between the 2 needles. And then I'm going to push that yarn out the back and take the old knit stitch off the left-hand side needle. And got to keep tightening my long tail. And then I'm going to bring my yarn to the back. Look at that beautiful little bump that I made with my purl. And I'm going to enter between the 2 stitches on the left-hand side needle and push my needle out the back. Yarn over, same direction, and ending between the 2 needles. Okay, and then pulling that bar, that yarn loop through the old purl stitch, pulling the old purl stitch off the left-hand side needle, and now I have the nice knit stitch. Bring my yarn to the front, purl. Remember, I'm going to enter from the right and go in between. Wrap around, yarn over, and always between the 2 needles, right? And then push that new loop through the back and take the old loop off the left-hand side needle. Now put my yarn to the back. Look, that was my purl. And The next stitch is a purl, so I'm going to be knitting over that, and that's perfect. That is just perfect. Yarn over, wrap it around, bring the yarn to the front, take that old stitch off the left-hand side needle. All right, now let's speed it up again. Now that we just did a knit stitch, we want to bring our yarn to the front, purl, bring your yarn to the back for knitting, knit, bring your yarn to the front for purl, wrap around, yarn over, yarn to the back for knit, yarn over, yarn to the front for purl, yarn over, yarn to the back, knit, yarn over, yarn to the front for purl, and just I get so into this that I have no idea what time it is. And we are almost done. Can you guys believe an hour passes so quickly? And it is really fun to start a project, get the momentum going, and then it's like, after I'm done with this, I just want to go and keep knitting and finish whatever I just started. And I'm so excited to see how it turns out. When I look at this though, I'm like, wow, it's so big. Is it going to fit my head? But it will, because I did a demo and it fits. Hopefully you kind of figured out your size of your head easily enough. I'm going to try and do a bind off before we go, and then quickly weave in some ends on the one that I already finished, just to show you guys all the skills. Hopefully when you were starting off, joining in the round wasn't too big of a deal, and you're keeping all your stitches in the same direction, right? They're all kind of in the center here. Always. And then once they start to kind of drop down, they'll still, you won't twist it. You'll always keep it in the same direction. Okay, that's a purl, right? And my yarn is in the back that I just purled, so I need to knit next. And hopefully you started to see what it looks like more easily. And sometimes if you can't see what you just did or what you're trying to do next, you pull it down a little, and then you can see the V really easily, right? There's the V. You can see that you're not looking at the purl from the row before. You're looking at the V, the knit that you just did. Or you look at this side and you're like, what's happening? And there's a purl, a V for knit, and a purl, right? So just really paying attention to that pattern. If you're getting distracted like I always do, you're never going to stay fully present when you're knitting. It's impossible, right? At some point you'll get distracted. You'll say, what did I just do? And being able to identify what the stitch looks like, and that just comes with practice, but also just maybe pulling it down a little and looking closely when it's something like this. Because looks can be deceiving, especially at the beginning of a pattern. You can really get confused about what's happening. But once it gets going and you're a few rows in, it is very easy to see what's happening. And you can see the mistakes really easily. And mistakes are totally fine. But if you're like me and you're just like, I really wish that I didn't completely mess up that whole row. I wish it just looked nicer. Might just have to do it again. And that's okay. Doing things again just means I'll do it so much better the next time. It'll look beautiful every time. You just put your heart into it and go for it. Do a little time check here. Ooh, all right. We're gonna have to really speed it up. It takes a while to go through each row. That's why you have people that go to little knitting circles and they just talk and hang out and they can knit without even looking at it. And they're just, by the time they leave, they're just like, wow, did so much knitting. Okay. This is a purl, this is a knit, so I gotta do a purl. We used to have craft night, my friends and I, and those were the best nights. But, you know, of course, sometimes you didn't get to craft. You just ended up talking or doing some work. I had to do work sometimes, but oh man, I loved it when I got to craft. At least I got to see the friends. All right. So now I ended on a purl, which is very strange, right? It's because of the odd number of this pattern. And we are going to just do a quick bind off, okay? Because when you get to the end of this, which is about 4 inches, but not really, I'm sure I measured it with my thumb. Let's see what it really is. It's 3.5. So I just took my thumb and was like, oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4, which it's not, but that's okay. This is actually how thick I wanted it. The width is perfect for me. It's not that cold in Tucson. So what am I going to do to bind off? Well, it's super easy to bind off. I love it. Let me show you. So I'm going to knit, because the bind off is knitwise. If you want to move your marker, you can just take it off for now, because it's pretending this is the end. We're just going to knit. Oh, I got to put my yarn in the back. Knit. And then knit again. And then take this, I don't know where my camera went. I guess because it's the end of the class, it just disconnected, maybe. How sad. Well, let's do it here. So you knit and then you take your the first stitch that you knit and you just loop it over the second stitch that you knitted. And I know you can't see that at all, but let me try again. So like I have to knit another one. Oh, that's what's happening. There's too many things in my hand. I'm going to knit another one, and then I'm going to take this knit stitch that's on the inside on my right needle. No, this isn't working. I really needed my camera. All right. I don't know why it disconnected. Oh, well, now we're back for a few more minutes. So I'm going to take the knit stitch that is on my right hand side needle to the right here, the second one in, and loop it over the first one. Okay, and you'll see as time goes on, this gap will become bigger. Knit again. And there's always these 2 stitches you're working with, and then take the one on the inside of the right needle and loop it over the one you just knit. So that's what you're binding off there. Knit again, and then just take this second one in and just loop it over the one you just knit. And you're just going to do that all the way around. Don't forget to weave in your ends. Sometimes it can look something like this, where you kind of weave it at a diagonal through the beautiful seed stitch, and then you don't even notice it when you are looking at it because it's on the inside. You can keep all your you're weaving in on the inside. This is where the yarn split and I had to tie it back together. Oh no. So I would try and make the end of your tail as small as possible and get your yarn needle and put that yarn through. Doesn't need to be too much through because it kind of holds itself in place. And remember where the inside is, that you're not going to be showing off as much, and kind of start to just put it through those seed stitch loops at a diagonal. That's nice. Or you can go sideways, but it might start to like peek out. I would go towards the center here because then it won't ever peek out of your beautiful ear warmer. It'll stay all nice and tucked in the middle. And then cut it and wear it. Beautiful. What do you think? We did good. We did a lot. That's all for now. It was really great spending time with you guys, and I'll see you not next week, but the week after. Or not the week after, June 11th, I think. All right. Thanks. We'll see you next time.